Welcome to Literary Libations with Librarians. And this week we are going to be talking about our favorite picture books because November is Picture Book Month. As we're talking, if you would like to get your hands on any of these titles, there are several different ways that you can go about doing that. The first and probably quickest way is to contact your local branch of the Monroe County Library System and speak to one of the librarians there, and they will be more than happy to assist you. If you'd prefer to do it on your own, you can go to our online catalog. That web address is on your screen now, and you can request physical versions of these titles, hardcovers, paperbacks, audio CDs, large print when they're available. I will say with picture books, it is almost always just going to be in the regular hardcover format. There are some that were available digitally, and if you're interested in those, you can go to one of the two formats, whichever one is listed. Overdrive, or you may hear it referred to as Libby. If you're on your app store, you might want to search by Libby, but Overdrive created Libby. And Overdrive offers downloadable ebooks and audiobooks. And there is also Hoopla, which offers downloadable ebooks and audiobooks, as well as movies, music, and graphic novels. And the great thing about Hoopla is that there is never a wait for any of those items that you see on their platform. With us this week, we have a big group because people love picture books and librarians love taking a look at them. I'm Jennifer Graneski, and I'm the branch librarian at the Dundee Library. And our introductory question this week was, what was your favorite picture book as a child, or what picture books do you enjoy reading to your children or grandchildren? And being a child of the 70s, the books that are on your screen now may look familiar. These are the Sweet Pickles books, and I believe that they had like a mail order system so that you could receive a book in the mail, and all of them centered on animals that were characterized by one personality characteristics. These were not well-rounded animals. They were, they had one thing that they were identified by, whether positively or negatively. And so I had many of these books. I know I had Who Stole Alligator's Shoe? An alligator ran around town to all the animals, accusing them of stealing his shoe. And all of the animals reacted in whatever way that their personality dictated that they had to. There was Enormous Elephant, which now looking back seems, a little self-evident. And poor elephant was always hungry, and he owned a grocery store, and he had a hard time not eating the profits. And when I was little, I wasn't sure what eating the profits was. Like, was that a food? And we never had profits at our house. So I remember that, but I just remember there was like a map in one of the books that showed where everybody in the town lived, and I was fascinated by that. I loved all their little animal personalities. They were the ones you didn't like and the ones that were sweet and kind. And to this day, I'm still not sure why they call them Sweet Pickles. I don't know, that's just what it was called. So these were my favorite books growing up as a child of the 70s. And if you weren't a child of the 70s, I don't know that you got to enjoy these as much. So there you go. Sweet Pickles, read them, love them. Might not have been great literature, but I read them over and over as a kid.
My parents still have some in their basement that they kept. So yes.
Yes. My parents have some in their basement too.
Can't get rid of them. They're classic.
No. So, well, my dad keeps everything. So I'm sure at some point these books will be coming my way, but right now they're still in our basement. So also with us this week, we have Kristen Brown, who is a reference librarian at the Bedford branch. And what was your favorite book as a child, Kristen?
So my favorite book was called Mufaro's Beautiful Daughters, and it is written and illustrated by John Steptoe. And I basically just loved this book as a child because of the illustrations in it. I've always been captivated by art, and John Steptoe is one of my favorite illustrators. He just has this really rich way of telling stories, not only through the narrative, but just through his images. And this book is beautiful. Now, when I had picked this, this came to mind, and I was like, okay, cool. I just associate this with my sister and my mother, which, if y'all didn't know, Kelly's my sister. So I originally couldn't think of a book, and then I said, oh, one of us has to do Mufaro's Beautiful Daughters, and she said, oh, I thought you were going to do that for your favorite book. And I was like, yeah, that's great. So I'm not even really sure. I have no memories of exactly when this book came in to be my favorite or when we read it, but I just know that it's a tradition, and I always associate this book with my mother and my sister, and so it's just kind of been a thing for our family. But as a child, it's kind of like a fairy tale story. It's very similar to like a Cinderella, except for the magic in it is so much, I don't know, in my opinion, cooler. Like, she doesn't get like a carriage out of a pumpkin. It's this prince who ends up doing these really crazy things. I won't give away the story. You should read it. It's amazing. But just the illustrations in this book are beautiful. And John Steptoe does such a great job of laying out the illustrations to where it doesn't even feel like a book. They just take up the whole page, and the text that he writes is really rich, and he did a lot of research in doing this. So all of the animals and the flora in this book are all based on this ancient city in Zimbabwe. And so even the names of the characters are based on this ancient language, and it's really beautiful, rich book. And so I really appreciated that as a child. So even today, I've used this, I've read this book in my classroom. I continue to look at it. I read it to my daughters. It's a beautiful, beautiful book.
Thank you, Kristen. And as she mentioned, Kelly is her sister, and we also have with us this week Kelly Beister, who is the branch technician at our South Rockwood Library. And tell us about your favorite childhood picture book, Kelly. Oh, you might be muted.
Let's see. I got it. So Mufaro's Beautiful Daughters, of course, is one of mine as well. Like Kristen said, it brings back memories of my mom reading it to us. But when I think about my childhood and memories of reading things on my own, I think of Little Bear by Elsie Homeland Minerick. We still have some of these books in the system, which makes me so happy. And whenever I pick them up to send them out somewhere, or even when I'm doing a shelf read, it just brings me back to me sitting in my room reading this over and over again. It's a collection of short stories. This particular one, this is the first book in the series, but there's other books that go with it as well. But even just looking at this picture just makes me so happy. I haven't read it in a really long time, but just seeing it makes my heart so happy. And then I was thinking, what a bad mom I am that I haven't even introduced this to my children. Like, it's so great, but I've never read them to my kids. So, that's on my bucket list that I'm going to have to do here shortly for them. But yeah, I remember I have very vivid memories of sitting in my room, when you tell your mom that you're bored and she tells you go find something to do, or she'll find you something to do. So I remember pulling this book out quite often and reading it and just enjoying the pictures, as simple as they are. It goes with the simplicity of the dialogue, which is, it's an ABC reader, and I can read book, which, gave me a lot of confidence sitting and reading it by myself in the room, avoiding a deep clean in the bathroom. So I really enjoy this book, and every time I see it, it just makes my heart so happy. We have a couple here at my branch, and it makes my heart happy.
Aww. I think I had that one too. The illustration looks familiar, and I love the mom's sewing machine.
I know, it's just so great.
What I love too is they made a show, and the show really captures like the magic that Little Bear had, because I also loved Little Bear when I was little too. And when Kelly said she was doing this book, I was like, oh, I have this really great memory of being in school. And there's also like an animated series they did with this, and I thought they did a great job with it too. So
I did not know there was an animated series.
I didn't either.
I'll have to look that up.
My kids loved it. It was great. Yeah.
Aww. Well, thank you, Kelly. Also with us this week, we have Stephanie Winterstein, who is the Youth Services Librarian at the Ida and Summerfield Petersburg Libraries. And Stephanie is going to share with us her favorite childhood picture books.
Well, before I get into these, I was also going to say Sweet Pickles books.
Sweet Pickles.
Yeah, like Jennifer said when we were talking about this earlier, it must date us a little bit, but like there was a like a little bookshelf that came with it, and every time you got them, you could put them into the bookshelf, and I carried that bookshelf everywhere I went. Like to my grandpa's house, it went with us. So I have great memories of that. But the other books that I vividly remember are the Richard Scarry books. The one in particular would have been The Great Big Schoolhouse, and I don't know what it is about them that I had it all the time. Again, that's another book that's still in my parents' basement, I believe. And like the binding is falling off. I played school with those books. I played library with those books. I read it all the time. And they have them today. I think they've been updated, but they're from like the 60s and 70s, like early 70s. So, well, I'm not quite that old. They just bring back lots and lots of really good memories. And it's, I don't know, it just, like Kelly said, it makes my heart happy when I think back to it, the simpler times, and when I could just like, play, read it to myself. I didn't need someone to read it to me when I was really young, and it just brings back good memories.
Yeah, when I went out and was looking for images, the first ones that came up were the updated versions. Yeah. And I was like, no, I don't want those.
No. The older
I need the vintage ones.
Yes, and I'm so glad you found a picture of the one that I can see in my mind, because as soon as I saw that, I'm like, yes, that's what I was. That's it. Not the updated ones.
No, I mean, those are great, but these are the ones that take us back.
Exactly.
Thank you, Stephanie. Also with us this week, we have Mandy Draganek, who is a cataloger at our DOMI Administrative Building. And what picture books take you back to your childhood, Mandy?
Well, can I say that as another child of the 70s, my first pick would have been Steph's Richard Scarry books, because those are the ones I remember sitting in my room just staring at for hours. I had the busiest people one, and so yeah, right back to my room as a kid. But I did also have a couple of the older Little Critter books, and I was probably a little bit of a bigger kid. But I did read them to my kids and my grandson now too. They're very short, they're very sweet. Little Critter is always facing some very normal childhood dilemma. Like he does not want to go to bed, and he does not want to take a bath, and he does, he misses his mom when he goes to his grandparents' house, and just really normal things that kids can identify with easily. And the pages are all just full of busy little pictures that even like my 2-year-old grandson, he'll just sit there and look at them. Mm-hmm. And he never gets bored. He never tries to turn to the page before I'm done reading on those. So he's just a cute little critter, and I love him.
Thank you, Mandy. And also with us this week, we have Bonnie Jennings, who is a retired Dundee Schools librarian and is also currently a clerk at the Dundee Branch Library. And Bonnie, I believe, is going to share with us one of her favorite books to read aloud to her children, grandchildren, and anybody else that will listen.
Yes, this one is Rocking Horse Christmas by Mary Pope Osborne. And the illustrations, they're called paintings by Ned Binninger, and they just make the book as special as she did with her narrative. This little boy gets this rocking horse for Christmas, and he makes a little stable for it next to his bed and names him Shadow and feeds him hay. And it's just all in his imagination. He fights against knights and dinosaurs, and the illustrations are outstanding, and it just really takes kids, into their imagination. And he grows older, so Shadow's put up in the bedroom first of all, and he's looking out the window, and the boy he thought was his boy is riding a bike, and then he gets in a car and he drives, and he grows up and he thinks it's his boy, and then since then he's been put in the attic, and he's getting all covered with webs, and there's a teddy bear up there, and it said, "I know how you feel." Now, I used to be down there too, and Christmas Eve, there's a huge storm, and the attic window breaks, and they hear this noise, and they come upstairs, and there's another little boy, and he said, "What is this, Dad?" And the dad's like, that's my oldest friend in the world. It's like, oh, and I love reading it to kids because their eyes are looking. And so this other little boy gets on and they rock and they fly all Christmas night. In the last picture, you see the hooves of reindeer, you know, where the boy is rocking in the horse. And I read this to a class last year when we could go into class and read, and there was a grandparent in there. And at the end, she goes, oh, that's the little boy. He's the man. It's like, yes, that's the point of the story. The kids don't get that that's, you know, the boy grown up really, but they love the book. And so I have to practice it because at the end, his heart takes flight. That's part of the narrative. And it's, you look at these little kids' face and it's like, oh, it's so sad. You're going to be grown up someday too, and it'll be more meaningful. But that is my favorite.
Aw, thank you, Bonnie.
Yeah. You're welcome.
And now we're going to get into sharing just some of our overall favorite picture books. And I feel like we have a pretty good range. There's just so many things that picture books cover. They make us laugh. Bonnie said they really touch our hearts with moments in our lives. So we're going to share what we chose, but I want you to know this was really, really hard because I gave everybody 3 because I figured we would be fast talking about picture books because they're short. But even that was really hard. Like, I think everybody could have filled a page of their favorites. I'm going to ask Stephanie if she would get us started, please.
Okay. Asking a children's librarian what their favorite book is like the most impossible thing in the world. It's like asking you to choose between your children, which one is your favorite. Yeah, this was hard. And I think I kept adding and changing and like, wait, no, this. But there's 3 that I definitely want to talk about. So one of the first ones is Everyone Loves Bacon by Kelly DePuccio. I'm not even sure how to say her last name, which is terrible. But this is one of the books that I've read to the classes in the past. And almost every time, if not every time, I go back in classes now, they know that I always try to bring funny books because that's their favorite. They'll always be like, did you bring the bacon book? Did you bring the bacon book? I'm like, no, I didn't bring it this time. I brought you some other ones, but we love the bacon book. So it's definitely a favorite. It's just so cute. I mean, first of all, who doesn't love bacon? And then there's like, he's playing a guitar and there's dancing food and the kids just love it. There's also Everyone Loves Cupcake, which is also a fun favorite. But it's just a really fun read. The pictures are fun. I recommend you pick it up to check it out and read it. The next book is Maple. Now Maple this is a very sweet book. So Maple, she has a tree. And that's her tree. And, you know, the tree grows as she grows. And the pictures are just so sweet. But, you know, she grew up and then eventually, I think I can give this away because it's a series of books, but she gets a new baby sister and it's a willow tree. So when Willow's born, they plant a tree. But it was actually the Mitten Award 4 years ago. I got to meet the author. So that was really cool. The Mitten Award is the best picture book of the year, and that was in 2016, which makes me think of something that I wanted to mention. This year's Mitten Award was The Very Impatient Caterpillar by Ross Moran, and that's also a very cute book. So check that one out. He's so cute. He's like in his little cocoon, and he just wants out, you know, and he's like bored, and that's a fun one too. So that's not on the list here, but again, see, I can't stop talking about books because there's so many of them. And then the last book is The Wonderful Things You Will Be. Now to me, this one was by Emily Winfield Martin. This book is just very sweet. It would be a great book for a baby shower or a graduation or an adoption. But the pictures are very sweet. The story is very sweet. It's almost like a love story from a parent to a child. And it just kind of warms your heart. But what I really like the pictures, just the colors of it. It's just one of those feel-good stories. And I don't know, I just really enjoyed it. So those are my books.
And I want to say the Mitten Award is specifically for Michigan authors and or illustrators.
Yes.
And I think you've served on that committee,
Yes.
didn't you? Have you
Yes.
as well, Kelly? No? Okay. But Stephanie has. And
Yes.
that's super hard because you're going through a ton of books. And then you got to get a group of people who all have to agree.
Yes.
It's one of the fascinating things. I didn't do the Mitten. I did the YA committee 1 year and decided, wow, that was super stressful.
It's way too much pressure. That's why I never did it, because I was like, I can't. That's too much.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine doing like chapter books of any sort with that because there's so much. I think I might have actually done the chapter books once.
Yeah.
Now that I think about it, but I remember it being very overwhelming because there's so much to read. But the picture books were, I love that because you got to see all sorts of books that maybe you wouldn't have been exposed to, and then you got to break them down and see what other people thought about them, and it was just a really rewarding experience. But it was also very fun.
Yeah.
So.
So check those out. There's a whole list of them online. So thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you.
And let's have Mandy share her favorite picture books next.
So my first favorite, I don't even know which picture you have. I think it was Horton.
Yeah.
Horton Hears a Who.
Come up here.
And Horton I read over and over and over and over and over, and I probably had it memorized as a kid. And I mean, I just love everything about reading a Dr. Seuss book. I love the cadence. I love the illustrations. I love the made-up vocabulary. There's, like, what is there to not like about a Dr. Seuss book? But Horton, he's a very sensitive elephant, and he finds this speck of dust, and he hears a noise, and it turns out, I mean, we probably have seen the movie and all know the story, but there's this whole little city of little teeny tiny who's that live on this speck of dust, and he does his very best to protect them. And what I remember the most about this book is most of the book had that bluish, grayish color to it, except for these pages with all these clovers. And I remember just sitting there thinking, Horton, because an eagle steals the clover that he's protecting with this little speck of dust and drops it into this huge field of clovers. And Horton has to sift through them all to find the right clover. And in the book, they all think Horton has lost his mind, and they steal the clover from him, and they're going to boil it in oil. And Horton says, no, please, I promise you, there are all these little people. And throughout the book, he says a person's a person, no matter how small. And so he begs and begs and begs all the who's in Whoville to make as much noise as they can, so the kangaroo, who's really mean and nasty in the story, can also hear them. And eventually they do. They find the mayor in Whoville, finds this one teeny tiny little who has not been, doing his due diligence. He's just been, it's JoJo, and he's playing with his yo-yo, and he's making no noise. And so finally they bring him to the top of the tower, and he makes his sound, and that's just enough to put him over to the top so the kangaroo can also hear. And then the clover is saved, and they protect it forever and ever. And but just the sweetest book. And I will always read Horton if I get the chance. The next book is by Kobi Yamada, and it's maybe about 5 years old, I think. It's called What Do You Do with a Problem? And the story itself is just fantastic. He gets this little problem, and that's the first picture you see with the circle and the sky. And it starts off as a real thing, but a fairly small problem, but he doesn't want to deal with it. And so he tries to ignore it, and he tries to pretend it doesn't even exist. And he just tries to avoid it. And the more he tries to avoid it, the bigger the problem gets. And the illustrations and the coloring in this book, they are just purely emotional. The bigger his problem gets, the darker the illustrations become, and the more of the page, the darkness fills up. Until finally it's almost all black, and he just can't take it anymore, and he says, stop! And he decides to attack the problem. And you get the tiniest bit of this bright, warm, golden yellow color. And as he realizes that problems aren't really problems, they're an opportunity to be brave, an opportunity to change. the pages completely change into this warm golden yellow. And it's just emotionally, it's almost draining when the problem's so big. And then you just really feel this flood of release as he discovers the secret to a problem. Mm. And it's just beautiful. The story's beautiful. The illustrations are beautiful. I love everything about it.
I was so glad you picked these. They are beautiful. It's a wonderful book. Yes.
And then I'm not sure of the order, but another of Kobe Yamada's books is What Do You Do with a Chance? He has 3 or 4, I think. But it's the same thing. And this one, the little kid finds a chance, and it's up in that top picture, and it's just this little teeny tiny, looks like a little paper airplane. But the child doesn't take the chance. The child's scared. And so the chance goes away. And he thinks about it, and he says, oh, if I only get another chance, and another chance comes, and again, he's too scared. Another chance comes, and he grabs it, but he doesn't reach, and he falls, and he's so embarrassed, and he says, I'm never going to feel like that again. And so he starts to ignore all the chances that come his way. And eventually he realizes that there haven't been any more chances at all, and he's sad because he does want a chance. He does want to try. And so he makes the decision, the next chance that comes, he's going to take it no matter what. And he does in the other photo there, the big giant chance. And he just feels so free and so proud and so wonderful. And again, it's the same kind of illustrations, that same just emotional flood when you see the coloring on the pages. So those are my favorites.
Those books are really amazing. I just have to share that. Anybody should read those books because they are hopeful books, and they remind you that, yeah, you might have missed one chance. There's going to be another one. Yeah. And and they're beautifully illustrated. They're amazing. And of course, Dr. Seuss is incredible.
Oh, for sure.
Like, anytime you see a Dr. Seuss, my favorite with Tony was Fox and Socks, because I like to try and read it as fast as possible and not trip over the words. I don't know that he cared, but he sat there and let me read. So go ahead, Kristen. You were going to say something about.
Oh, I was just going to say the chance one is a really great. I mean, all of them are really great learning ones, but I use that one a lot in my classroom too. And I think we did like a professional development on it. But it was just it's a good read aloud book because the kids can follow along. And like you said, that problem gets bigger and it's represented in this image and this almost like physical thing. And then you see what happens if you just kind of run away from things and like you said, that little bit of gold, and then it slowly grows.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mandy. And let's have Kelly share her favorites next.
So I used to be a youth technician, and so picking my book, right, it's right there with you, Stephanie. I felt like I had to pick my favorite child. It was so hard. But my go-to were always funny books whenever I was in the classroom. So your books, all your guys' books have been really cute with the sweet stories, but all mine are really funny. So I'm going to start with the Elephant and Piggy books. I wish I could talk about all of them because they're so great. And they're by Mo Willems, which he's a genius. All of his books are amazing. But these books were the most fun for me to read out loud. They were the most fun to be over the top with the different voices. Gerald, the elephant, his voice was always like this. And then Piggy's was my normal voice. But this story was my favorite to read out loud because of the snoring and the dramatics of it. It was awesome. So the story starts with Gerald, the elephant, saying he is tired and cranky when he doesn't get enough rest. And so he's going to take a nap. So he gets his pal and he lays down. And then the book suddenly goes into a dream cloud and takes over the frame. But if you're not really paying attention, like children don't, you don't really know that it's a dream. So he starts dreaming about Piggy, his best friend, coming in. And they go on, and you know, Elephant Gerald is very cranky, and so he's snapping at Piggy, and then Piggy's like, well, maybe I'm cranky too, and I need to take a nap. And so Piggy lays down with Elephant, with Gerald, and they start taking a nap, and then Piggy starts snoring obnoxiously. And this, like, you know, has all the kids roaring and they think it's so hilarious. And then, you know, Elephant is annoyed, Gerald's annoyed because he can't take a nap. And then all of a sudden, Piggy starts floating in the air and she has a turn up head. And then, you know, you realize, wait a second, something's going on. And he wakes up and he's like, well, that was a crazy dream. So he was dreaming the whole time. And then Piggy comes in and says, how's your nap? So Mo Willems, the Piggy and Elephant books, they always have like something silly that's going on, but they're so easy and short. They're to the point, which I think is great for readers because there's a lot of kids who won't pick up books because they're too long. And I mean, my son, my oldest, will not pick up a book if it's too long. So he, when he was younger, loved these books because he could just fly right through them. Now, the sad part is Mo Willems is no longer writing Piggy and Elephant books. I was super sad about that. But you guys, I'm here to tell you, I got a new series and it's even better. Jennifer, I think you're going to love it. It's a squirrel book.
Oh, yes.
Limited Squirrels, and it's hilarious. What I love about these books, I'm just doing a special mention. It's not on my, I'm being a rebel. What I love about these is that they have jokes, it has information, and it's a story all put together with squirrels. Who doesn't love that? I mean, it's amazing. Manic squirrels all over the place.
Manic squirrels. And I also love any book by Mo Willems is worth reading, period.
For sure.
But I love that he does a little that Gerald is sleeping with, and I say Knuffle Bunny. I don't know if it's Nuffle or Knuffle, but I say Knuffle Bunny.
Knuffle. Yeah.
And then I love that Piggy is sleeping with a tiny little Gerald.
Yes, and
little stuffed Gerald.
Piggy even says, this is my best friend. I like to sleep with him. And Gerald goes, he makes that face like, oh, in his dream. Because Piggy's at this point, you know, Gerald's dreaming all this. And so I just love it. And then at the end of the book with the Easter egg, the pigeon is always somewhere in the back of the book, in the very, very back. And so the kids caught onto that and they love looking for that. So I highly recommend Elephant and Piggy books, especially for those the readers who are just starting. They're great for that. So, and they're just fun.
Yeah. And 25 years from now, 25, 30, there's going to be somebody out there talking about Elephant and Piggy books the way we talk about Sweet Pickles and Little Bear books.
Yes, absolutely.
So good.
So the next book I have is also a silly book, Bark George by Jules Pfeiffer. This is another one of my go-to for read alouds. I have my own personal copy. So it starts out with George's mother. They're both dogs. And George's mother says, bark, George. And George says, meow. And she says, no, George. Dogs go bark, cats go meow. Bark, George. And he says, I think he says, quack, quack is the next one. And then he goes on of all these different animal sounds. And his mother is just like, what the heck is going on? So she's like, I'm taking you to the vet. So they take him to the vet and the vet looks in his mouth and he's like, I got it. So he puts on his rubber glove and he says, open wide and bark, George. So, and he looks deep down inside of George and he pulls out a cat. And then he goes on to all the animals and he pulls out a duck and then he pulls out a cow. And then finally the vet says again, bark, George, and George goes, arf. And so the mother is so happy that she kisses the vet and all the animals that are in line and her baby, George, is cured. So they go out and she's just so proud and she wants to show George off. And so she tells George, bark, George. And George says, hello. He ate a person. And you don't see it coming. And the kids are like, what? My favorite book. It's my favorite read aloud because you don't see it coming. You think George is cured. And then he's in this group of people and he eats a person. That's Bark George by Jules Pfeiffer.
Oh, George.
Silly George.
He has a new book out, Bark George ABC. Did you know that? Or
No, I haven't seen that one.
Yeah.
No, I haven't seen that one.
Yes.
Oh, that's awesome. The last book I have is by another one of my favorite, Dave Horowitz. I haven't read a book that I don't like about that he's written, honestly. Humpty Dumpty Climbs Again. So it's the story of Humpty Dumpty, but the story that you don't know. So Humpty Dumpty climbs the wall. Humpty Dumpty has a great fall. All the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty together again, so they had the good sense to call a doctor. And the doctor can't put them together either. And he said, hey, man, listen, you're going to have to take a break. You're an egg, for goodness sake. So he decides he's not going to climb again. And then you see this picture of Humpty Dumpty sitting in his underwear watching TV and binge eating. All of his friends come by and they try to talk him out of it, while all the king's horses and all the king's men now are making fun of him because he's sitting in his chair in his underwear. So the dish and comes to talk Humpty Dumpty out of it. And he's like, what happened to you? You used to be such a brave egg. And he's like, this is getting ridiculous. Now you're just going to sit around and watch TV. And Humpty Dumpty says, whatever. After that great fall I had, climbing rocks just seems so silly. I mean, what's the point? So the dish says, well, if you say so, and then he runs away with the spoon. And then, while he's watching TV, along comes the spider, and the spider dropped down and frightened Humpty Dumpty, and he ran out of the door, so he's walking down the street in his underwear now, which by now the kids are like, oh, look at his underwear! And the little dog laughed to see such a sight, so poor Humpty Dumpty headed for the hills, and he came to another big wall, and he decided, oh, what the heck, I'm going to climb these couple of rocks, and when he does, he sees the king's horses and the king's men. He's like, oh, great, now they're going to make fun of me. But not really, because they're in trouble. The king's favorite horse, Milt, is stuck on the ledge, and they can't get him down. So what did Humpty Dumpty do?
Is he going to climb the wall?
He climbed again. You guessed it. Humpty Dumpty climbed again in his underwear without proper harnesses. Humpty Dumpty knew he could fall, but still he climbed up that wall. He got Milt, the horse, down, and the king's men were so happy. And from that day on, Humpty Dumpty never climbed again without the proper safety equipment or pants. The end. Equipment and pants, those are important things.
Humpty learned his lesson. It's all about wearing the pants and having the proper equipment.
That escalated quickly.
But I love it too because, nursery rhymes I feel like aren't always, like they were a big thing when we were younger, but I feel like they're just kind of fizzling out, right? Like kids don't know them as well as they used to. And so it's always interesting for me to say, okay, let's pick out the nursery rhymes in this book. And sometimes they get them and sometimes they don't. So I find that part fascinating, but yeah, it's a good one.
Thank you, Kelly. And now let's have Bonnie share her favorite picture books with us.
Okay. Well, I love the funny ones, but you guys hogged them all, so I chose something else. But the first one, I think, is Rudy's Pond, or Rudy's, yeah. Is that my first one on there?
It can
I'm
be.
pretty sure it is. Oh, no, Freedom Summer, yes. This one, oh, okay. I learned from this book, this is about the summer of 1964, and this little white boy Joe and his friend John Henry, they do everything together. John Henry's mom cleans, and so him and Joe, while the mom is cleaning, they swim in that's the top picture, they go swimming in the river, and John Henry is the best swimmer he knows, and they do everything together. They even go to the little store to get popsicles, but John Henry has to go in the back door, and Joe gets them for both of them rather than have John Henry have that embarrassment. So a new law is passed, and the public pools are open for everyone. And John Henry and Joe are so excited. They are going to swim in the pool together. And that bottom picture is a picture of the pool is being filled with asphalt, which is what happened in the South when the Civil Rights Act went through and pools were for everyone. So they just filled them up. And John Henry's sitting there, and they look over, and John Henry's brother is one of the workers filling that pool. And it is just heartbreaking to look at that. And I did not know that they actually filled the pool so that no one could use them. So they're sad, but they're going to get their popsicle on the way home. And Joe's going to get one for John Henry. And he said, nope, I'm going in and I'm going to get my own, and I'm going through the front door. And every time I read that, I have to practice it because it's a wonderful book for empathy that, shows kids, these are kids that was affecting too. So I did that more with middle school kids because they love to be read to. When we weren't doing, online projects and whatnot, once a month I would read to them, and they would run to the back corner just like a first grade class. So this was one, and I had an actual teacher cry at this one, and it didn't help me while I'm trying to read it that she's crying, but I think that's a great book, especially in this day and age. You know, we still have a ways to go, but at least we're not filling in the pools. So that was Freedom Summer, and that's by Deborah Wiles. So the second one also gave a lesson. It's called Rudy's Pond, and it's by Eve Bunting, who has written so many books that will really touch a heart and teach children not only empathy, but life lessons. And she did The Wall, about the Vietnam Memorial Wall. That is wonderful. That was done by Reading Rainbow, so I didn't read that one because I couldn't get through it. And she did one called Smoky Night, about the riots after Rodney King, but in a way that showed children what it was like for the children at that time. And this one, Rudy's Pond, this little girl lives next door to Rudy, and they do everything together. They have a little garden, and they're in the same class, and they draw pictures, and they make a hummingbird feeder together, and they do everything. And Rudy starts getting sick, and he's sicker and sicker. The class writing letters, and the little girl can go next door to see him, and then he's too sick, she can't see him. And then Rudy passes away. He didn't get better. So the class wants to do something for him. So they decide to make this pond, and they even make a hummingbird feeder. And this little girl notices this hummingbird keeps coming to the feeder at the school, and she sits by a window, and the hummingbird keeps coming to the window. And she feels, I guess, kind of like the spirit of Rudy is there watching her, and it gives her a warm, good feeling. And this one, it kind of really affected me, I guess, more when my son was in 3rd grade. One of his classmates was tragically killed. And so and he was a Cub Scout, so we did a tree, and it was extremely hard for those children. And I hope, that tree gave them something to do in his memory. And Dundee has a tree for a student that died there, and a janitor. So there's memorials all over the place that sometime down the line, you're going to know someone who has a memorial somewhere. And I just thought she did a really nice job of kind of wrapping up that little girl's void that Rudy was gone, but she could still think about him. So that's an Eve Bunting. She's got a lot of really well done books. She doesn't get a lot of press, I guess I'd say, but I like her.
And
the last one.
Oh, I'm going to interrupt you, Bonnie. I just want to say something. There's so many children's books that if your child is facing something difficult, there's usually a book that's going to talk about it, whether it's the loss of a friend or the loss of a parent or a pet, or if it's something else entirely. They use picture books in counseling now to help kids work through those emotions. So I think it's so important that there are books out there that deal with the difficult things in life too, and yet give kids hope.
Right. It'll get real morbid. They just, they're sad. They teach, some of them teach empathy in a really nice way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then the last one, this was a Caldecott winner, and kids just really love it. It's called Arrow to the Sun by Gerald McDermott. And I just remember reading this. It's a Pueblo Indian tale, but he's done a couple. One is about the Northwest Native Americans, and he does it so that it looks like the actual culture. And this one's done all with geometric shapes. And I just remember kids just enjoyed this so much. And this warrior, that it's kind of a creation story. How did the earth start? How did the light get to the earth? And this warrior is sent to these kivas, and I was lucky in my old job. We could do video streams and show an actual what a kiva looks like and what they would do. And he has to go into one where there's a bunch of bees, and he has to escape that. And I think there were 6 kivas, I forget, but each one, McDermott just does the excellent, colorful illustrations, and especially for boys, for some reason. That bottom picture, he's getting shot to the sun as an arrow, and for some reason it just appealed to them. So both of his books about the creation story, I thought were, very interesting on how Native Americans might have approached it.
Bonnie, I think you suggested this book to me when after I had left Dundee. When I saw that book cover, I was like, I feel like you had told me about that book before.
I might have.
Use in my classroom. It is a beautiful book.
It is a very pretty book. Yeah.
That's funny.
And it's a good read too. Mm-hmm. You're welcome.
And let's have Kristen share her favorite picture books.
All right. So the first book I have is The Widow's Broom, and it's by Chris Van Allsburg. And Chris Van Allsburg is a really amazing illustrator. Again, most of the books I picked are heavy on the illustrations that I found them appealing. Chris Van Allsburg is really cool also because he's a Michigan native. He's from Grand Rapids, and he's also written other books that you're probably very familiar with, like Polar Express and Jumanji. This book I feel like is a little bit less known, and actually I didn't even know about this book until probably 2 years ago. It was in my mother's classroom, and so she had it at her house, and I was asking her if she had any good Halloween books or like spooky books I could read with my 5-year-old, and so she brought this one over, and the illustrations in it did not disappoint, especially the part that I have up here. The storyline is about this witch, and her broom starts to gradually lose its magic, and it's pretty much just tells the story of what happens when a witch's broom stops working, which is a unique perspective because we don't really think about that. And so this witch, she falls off of her broom. She ends up in Mina Shaw's garden, and Mina Shaw's a widow, and she finds this witch, and she brings her into her home and kind of takes care of her. And the witch ends up leaving in the middle of the night. In the photo right there of the witch, that's her summoning another witch so that she could leave. But she ends up leaving her broom there, and her broom doesn't have enough power to fly, but it still has powers. And so Mina Shaw ends up building a relationship with this broomstick that's magical. However, her neighbors start to realize that this broom is doing all of these things for her. It's chopping wood, it's feeding the animals. It's not an evil broom. He's very, or it, I don't know. It's a very mild and, welcoming broom, but because it's different and it's seen as something bad, the townspeople get worried and they think that it's like the devil working. And so they end up trying to burn the broom. And there's a series of events that happen, and you end up finding that the broom is not destroyed. I'm not going to give away the ending because it's kind of spooky and cool, but it's definitely a really great book. I think it's great for children and adults. I think it's really great to read together because underneath all of the spooky magical things, there's also this really great lesson about not judging people by what you think they are, not making assumptions about people and the way that they live and what they do, and just not being afraid of things that you don't know about. So just because you don't know about something doesn't mean it's bad. So that one is ultimately one of my new favorites, and all of these books I have. So there's that one. And then I think the next one is Chrysanthemum. And this one holds a special place in my heart because I got to play Miss Delphinium Twinkle in 3rd grade. It was either 2nd or 3rd grade in Miss Shanaberger and Miss Dividock's class. And from that day on, I have loved this book because Miss Twinkle ends up kind of being one of the reasons why Chrysanthemum really learns to appreciate who she is. So Chrysanthemum is a mouse, and she loves her name. She her parents have raised her to believe that she is unique and she is wonderful and she is kind and she is all of these amazing things. And she goes to school and people at school are mean to her. They don't like her name. They think it's too long. It doesn't even fit on her name tag. And so she gets really down in the dumps. And so she goes back home and her parents tell her, like, you're amazing. You're beautiful. Don't listen to what other people are telling you. And so it's really about her trying to figure out, is she okay? Does she like who she is? Why is she having such a hard time? Why are kids being so mean? And so this is another one that I think is really about empathy and thinking about the way that you treat people. And so what happens is they get upset at her. They make her name is a flower. And so she has these nightmares that she's actually a flower and they're picking her petals off, and she gets so worried. She goes to school and she's wearing all of her good luck charms. She's super nervous. And then they go to music and they have a new music teacher, and that's Mrs. Twinkle. And they kind of make a snide remark about Chrysanthemum's name, and Miss Twinkle goes, well, I'm named after a flower. And so then, of course, all the kids are like, oh, well, call me Rose, call me Lily. And so because the teacher, ends up saying, hey, I'm named after a flower. Why does that make me any different? That's not cool. Then all the kids start to pretend like their names are flowers. And so it's just a really cute book. The illustrations are really cute. And like I said, it's more of the fact that I got to be in the play, and so it made me feel really cool. So that's a favorite for ours. I read that one to my girls quite a bit. And the last one that I picked is another new one that I kind of picked up recently. This one's called Parker Looks Up, an Extraordinary Moment, and it's by Parker Curry and Jessica Curry. And I do remember when this photo went viral. Do you guys remember when this story kind of came out about this little girl? So she took a trip to the National Portrait Gallery with her mom and some friends, and they go through the museum, and in the book they just talk about her experience in the museum. So she goes through the museum and she's seeing all of these portraits, and they talk about all these different things that she's looking at. So like there's cameos with like Frida Kahlo and a portrait of Washington Carver and Edgar Degas, and she stops right at Michelle Obama's portrait. And so if you haven't seen Michelle Obama's portrait, like her official portrait, I have it right there. And that's a picture that went viral of Parker looking at her. And the portrait's by Amy Sherald. And so she looks up at this portrait, and I didn't have the right picture, but if you look at her from the side view, Parker's mouth is literally open. Like she's looking at Michelle Obama, like all you see is just awe in her face. And I just think it's a really beautiful book because, number one, I love Michelle Obama. I think she is just such an amazing woman. If you haven't read Becoming, it's wonderful. If you haven't watched the documentary Becoming, it's beautiful. And I think it's really a positive book. It represents women in a positive light. The page that Parker sees Michelle, she just talks about how it opened up this avenue. And so she sees this flash of all these things that she could be. She could be a doctor, she could be a lawyer, she could be an athlete. And so all of these words, it's Parker looking up, and it's all these words like mother, lawyer, writer, inspirational, dynamic, advocate, volunteer, friend, sister, all of these things that you could say describes Michelle Obama. And I think it's just because it offers representation. It shows women in this positive light. It shows Black women in a positive light. And I thought it was beautiful. The illustrations in it are very soft. It looks like it was done digitally, which I really appreciate. And at the end, it's really cute because Parker is in a dress that is like Michelle Obama's dress. So like on the back of the book, I don't know if you guys can see, she's like in that dress. You guys can't see it.
You can right there.
And it's just a really great book. And so I really, really enjoyed it. And we have it in Vox, which is awesome. So if you're not familiar with our Vox books, they will read the book to you. So I could read this with both of my girls and kind of stop it and talk to them at certain points. Or, you know, like I could read it out loud to them. But also Celia, my oldest, can just look at it on her own and it'll read it to her. So those are my books.
Thank you, Kristen. And now for mine. The first book that I'm going to talk about, I don't even remember why I went over to go look at the children's book. I don't know if I was pulling a book for somebody else that was on a list. I'm not sure, but I was over in our farm animal books and I pulled this book out, and this cover just drew me in because look at those animals. Look at those faces. Look at that chicken. That chicken is serious. This is serious stuff. This is serious farm. They're not fooling around. And that's Farmer Fred there. And Farmer Fred knows that farming is a serious business. There's nothing funny about corn. Nothing. And so he runs his farm very seriously. And all the animals are serious with him, you know? And there comes a time when they start to get concerned and they're not feeling quite right. And they feel like they need more smiles. And you can see the goat, I believe the goat's name is Bernie. You can see him up there in the upper right corner. And he stretched his mouth and he showed all his teeth. And it wasn't a very convincing smile. No. And they all realized that they needed a little bit more fun in their lives. And so all the farm animals spend the book trying to get Farmer Fred to smile. And it is hard work. At one point, they all dress up in Farmer Fred's clothes and have a dance party. And Farmer Fred comes outside and looks at him and says, "Just don't get my clothes dirty." And then he goes back to bed. And at another point, the cow decides to act like the rooster, and Farmer Fred looks at him and says, "That's not funny. That's just weird." So the animals don't know what to do, and the book just focuses on this attempt to get Farmer Fred to smile and to make the farm a little bit more fun. And until I randomly pulled this book out, I did not know who Tim Egan was. He has a very dry sense of humor. But I love Farmer Fred. I love his serious farm animals. And in the end, there's a positive resolution for all involved. So that is Serious Farm. Pick it up. My next book is Most People by Michael Leanna. And this one I was introduced to by one of our youth services people here at the Monroe County Library System, Sherry Boudry. And every once in a while, Sherry does picture book talks for all of the librarians. And she finds the most amazing books. And this is a hopeful book, which I feel like I need probably every day, but particularly maybe right now. So this book says that most people are good, no matter what they look like, no matter their age, no matter their race, no matter their religion. Most people are good people, even if they make mistakes, even if they make wrong choices, even if they lose their tempers. Most people are good people. And one particular page in the book says, if you could line up all the people who want to be good and all the people who want to be bad, the good line would stretch from here to the tallest mountain, and all the bad people and all the people in the bad line could crowd together in a dark and gloomy room. And I think this is so important. We've talked several times about books that remind us to have empathy, remind us that people don't have to be like us to be good. We don't have to agree with people for them to be good. Most people are good. And I love this picture towards the end where it shows all the different people in their homes and how much we do have that is alike. And people want to be good to others. They want to see other people smile. They want to see other people laugh. So this is a lovely, hopeful, brightly illustrated book, and it makes my heart happy. And my final book I picked because it's so silly. And this is Nothing Rhymes with Orange by Adam Rex. And as we all know, orange is one of the few words in the English language that nothing rhymes with. And poor Orange, all of the fruit is getting together and having like a rhyming party. So they're all running around, making up rhymes about each other, shouting them out to each other. In particular, they have a refrain that says, fruit. They're healthy, happy, colorful, and cute. Fruit. And poor Orange isn't included in any of their lines. I mean, there's a line about a date. The date is on a date and things are going pretty great. There's a line about a yam. The yam is looking glam and the jam band's making jam. A yam's not a fruit, and Orange is offended. How is the yam getting included and Orange doesn't get included? Orange also points out that most of the time he and Kumquat never get included in the rhymes, and this time Kumquat makes it in. The Kumquat and the current felt left out until they weren't. I love these. And then my favorite line is, I think cherries are the berries and a lychee is just peachy. Thus Spoke Zarathustra is a book by Friedrich Nietzsche. I mean, it's a book that has Friedrich Nietzsche in it. How can you not love a book with Friedrich Nietzsche? It's just insane. And any book by Adam Rex tends to just kind of go off the surreal end. Like, it's hysterical. And Orange's comments during the book are so funny. One of my favorites is there's one point where Orange is over it. Like, they're doing all these rhymes and he's like, you know, this book is done. It's not that great. Like, this is just silly now. And then you turn the next page and something happens and Orange is like, who am I kidding? This book is amazing. He wants to be part of it. Poor Orange. So the book resolves in Orange does manage to find a way to be invited into the rhyming party of the healthy, happy, colorful, and cute fruit. So it's funny, it's silly, and it has Friedrich Nietzsche in it, which is amazing. Like, that's my favorite thing about the whole book. Also, it cracks me up because my 12-year-old son also loves this book. Like, I told him what we were talking about for Literary Libations today, and he literally looked at me, and the first words out of his mouth were, "Are you going to do Nothing Rhymes with Orange?" Yes, of course. Now I have to. So I love that my middle schooler still finds the joy and the absurd and the silly picture books that are out there. So bless Adam Rex. I look forward to every book that he comes out with because they are all fun and happy, and we need more of that. So thank you to each of you for participating and sharing and culling and curating those picture books lists down to a few of your favorites. Next week, we are going to be talking about books that help us do stuff, or at least make us want to do stuff, because I feel that's more where mine fall, where I read it and go, this is amazing, I should do this. And then
you don't.
I don't. But it makes me want to. So those are the books we're going to be sharing next week. We hope that everybody has a great week. Enjoy this incredible autumn Michigan weather. If you happen to be listening when this actually gets published, we're having amazing weather. So enjoy it and have great weeks. Bye.